Morning, all. All right, so the 1991-1992 NHL season. This was a year that saw Pittsburgh repeat, and they didn't look like they were going to repeat. What's really interesting looking back is the 1990-91 and 1991-92 Penguins were a good team that got hot at the right time. And in back-to-back years, Pittsburgh Penguins jersey being worn. And of course, there's 3 more times where I'm going to wear a Pittsburgh jersey after this. So they find a way to get back to the championship. At any rate, we'll go through and we'll talk about it. But first, the standings. We start with the Adams, of course. Montreal leading the way under coach Pat Burns. 41-28-11 record for him. 93 points, 267 goals scored, 207 goals against. Sorry, had to pause for a sneeze there. All right, Boston finishes second, 84 points, a record of 36-32-12. They're coached by Rick Bowness. 270 goals scored, 275 goals against. So that just shows you how long Rick Bowness's career as a head coach was. The Buffalo Sabres, 31-37-12 under coach John Muckler. 74 points, 289 goals scored, 299 goals against. The Hartford Whalers make the playoffs with 65 points, so the Patrick division has reason to be upset with that. 26-41-13 record, 65 points, 247 goals scored, 283 goals against. The Quebec Nordiques still bad, but getting better. They improved to 52 points. Remember, they were 31 points 2 years ago, so I remember at the time thinking, so over the next 20 years, they should build up to being a playoff team. 20-48-12 record for them under coach Pierre Pagé. 255 goals scored, 318 goals against. So again, the numbers are getting better, but slowly. The good news being, hey, Quebec fans still supporting the team, even though they've been god-awful for years. It's 4 years in a row they've been really, really bad. Now, the Patrick division is won that year by the New York Rangers. 50-25-5 record, 105 points. Roger Nielsen's the coach. 321 goals scored, 246 goals against. The Washington Capitals finished second in the division with 98 points. Record of 45-27-8. 330 goals scored, 257 goals against under coach Terry Murray. The Pittsburgh Penguins, 39-32-9 record, 87 points. Scotty Bowman is the coach. He took over that season after Bob Johnson passed away. So I'll finish up the numbers here. 343 goals scored by Pittsburgh, 308 goals against. But Bob Johnson was the coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins when they won the Cup in 91. He passes away early in the 91-92 season. And so Scotty Bowman takes over as coach and does an excellent job. And the fact that he gets them back to a Stanley Cup and they win it again, absolutely fantastic story. So while, again, as I said, they didn't have great regular seasons either of those years, Scotty Bowman really showed he's one of the, if not the best coach ever with what he did that season. And then he'd go to Detroit and have some success there as well. In New Jersey, Tom McVie's the coach, 38-31-11 record for the Devils. They also have 87 points, 289 goals scored, 259 goals against. So New Jersey's still in the playoffs. The New York Islanders, 34-35-11 under Al Arbor. They just missed the playoffs, 79 points. And again, they would have been third in the Adams division. They would have been fourth in the Norris division. They would not have made the playoffs in the Smythe, which has grown to 6 teams that year. But under Al Arbor, 291 goals scored, 299 goals against for the New York Islanders. The Philadelphia Flyers going through some stuff. 32-37-11 record, 75 points, 252 goals scored, 273 goals against. Under Paul Holmgren, they go 8-14-2. Bill Dineen takes over as coach. Goes 24-23-9. And I believe coached his son, Kevin Dineen, in Philadelphia as well. We go out west. Brian Murray's Detroit Red Wings win the division, 98 points, a record of 43-25-12. 320 goals scored, 256 goals against. So this is where Detroit's emerging as a power in the National Hockey League. Chicago, 36-29-15 record, 87 points under coach Mike Keenan, 257 goals scored, 236 goals against. The St. Louis Blues, 36-33-11 under coach Brian Sutter for 83 points, 279 goals scored, 266 goals against. The Minnesota North Stars make the playoffs. They actually had more points than they did the previous year where they went all the way to the final. They do not go back to the final. Bob Gainey's the coach of the team that goes 32-42-6. 246 goals scored, 278 goals against for the 70-point Minnesota North Stars. The Toronto Maple Leafs, 30-43-7 record, so 67 points, 234 goals scored, 294 goals against. The Toronto Maple Leafs are coached by Tom Watt. One thing to keep in mind with the Minnesota North Stars is we're not that far from this team moving to Dallas. And by the time you reach 91, 92, there was talk about attendance and needing a new building. Things like that start getting out there, and of course, eventually the team would move to Dallas. The Smythe Division's won by Vancouver, which shocked almost everybody. 42, 26, and 12 record, 96 points, 285 goals scored, 250 goals against. Under coach Pat Quinn, who's also the general manager, and swung the deal for Cliff Ronning, Sergio Momesso, and various others from St. Louis. St. Louis really helps Vancouver become quite a good team. And for my money, to this day, the 91-92 Vancouver Canucks, I think that was the best roster they ever had. Just me personally, that's how I feel. The LA Kings finished second, 84 points, a record of 35, 31, and 14, 287 goals scored, 250 goals against, coached by Tom Webster. The Edmonton Oilers, now coached by Ted Green, as John Muckler's moved on to Buffalo. The Oilers finished 36, 34, and 10, 82 points, 295 goals scored, 297 goals against. The Winnipeg Jets, coached by John Paddock, 33, 32, and 15 record, 81 points, 251 goals scored, 244 goals against. The Calgary Flames, 31, 37, and 12 record, 74 points, 296 goals scored, 305 goals against. Doug Risebrough, 25, 30, and 9 record. And then Guy Chiron takes over 6, 7, and 3 record under Chiron. The San Jose Sharks make their debut this season, and they're not bad. I remember a lot of talk about how San Jose might challenge the Washington Capitals record of 8 wins, and for futility, and they didn't have anything to worry about. They finished with a record of 17, 58, and 5, 39 points, 219 goals scored, 359 goals against. So they had more points in their first year than Quebec had 2 years prior. So not too bad under coach George Kingston. So again, it is the 75th anniversary season of the National Hockey League. The Rangers are first in the NHL for the first time since 1941-1942. So they had a tough time during the original 6 era. The Rangers not a top team, and now the Rangers a top team again. So how close are they to the Stanley Cup? Only a couple years away. There's a 10-day player strike that delayed the start of the playoffs. The NHL just delayed the regular season games that hadn't been played yet, and it led to the Stanley Cup final taking place in June, which becomes a feature, not a bug after that. Scotty Bowman, again, takes over as coach when Bob Johnson passes, which is this fantastical story when you reach the playoffs. Just really emotional, moving story. The Hawks and the Penguins both had 11-game winning streaks in the 1992 playoffs. It was insane. And it kind of felt like everybody just wanted the playoffs over as quickly as possible. Sweep, 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 get it all done, and finished. Now, this was supposed to be the rookie year for Eric Lindros, but in 1991, when he's drafted first overall, of course, he refuses to put on the Nordiques jersey. He refuses to join the Quebec Nordiques. There would be a lot of discussion about why. He would get traded after this season was done. The trade would finally happen. In fact, Quebec enjoyed trading him so much they did it twice, which is weird, and we'll probably talk about it in tomorrow's video. But yes, without Eric Lindros being able to help the team, the Nordiques still improve at least a little bit to 58, 52 points, but they're desperate to turn things around, and they would give in to Lindros's demands and trade him a year after they had drafted him first overall. September 3rd of 1991, Scott Stevens is awarded to the New Jersey Devils from St. Louis in exchange for St. Louis signing Brendan Shanahan. So restricted free agents work a little different during this era. It is, we sign this restricted free agent. Okay, now an arbitrator is going to decide what the prize is going the other way. And in this case, the arbitrator decided Scott Stevens was a fair trade-off for Brendan Shanahan. And the Devils would take this trade all day, really, in all honesty. And I mean, Shanahan is a Hall of Famer, one of the best goal scorers of his era. But it's Scott Stevens and what he does for that New Jersey Devils blue line. There you go. So that takes place. And again, New Jersey gets Scott Stevens without having to trade him. They were trade for him. So that's not too shabby. October 4th of 1991, kind of an earth-shattering move here in that the Oilers trade Mark Messier to the Rangers for Bernie Nichols, Stephen Rice, and Louis DeBrusque. Mark Messier was kind of the last holdout in terms of the superstar players in Edmonton. that, we're trying to keep the team in contention status. And Messier eventually goes to the Rangers, and we know things go pretty well. The Rangers end up finishing first overall that year, and Messier has himself a ridiculous season for the New York Rangers. So that trade does not age well for Edmonton at all, even right away. As Bernie Nichols has moved again, he, of course, had been moved at the All-Star break from LA to the Rangers not that long before that. October 25th of 1991, a huge trade between the Sabres and the Islanders. The Sabres trade Pierre Turgeon, Benoit Hogue, Uwe Krupp, Dave McElwain to the New York Islanders for Pat LaFontaine, Randy Hillier, and Randy Wood. This is a trade that really helps Buffalo. Not that Pierre Turgeon is a slouch. Of course, he's in the Hall of Fame now as well. But I like what LaFontaine was able to do for Buffalo. January 2nd of 1992. This was the biggest trade in NHL history. I think it still is in terms of players. The Flames trade Doug Gilmour, Rick Nattrass, Jamie McCowan, Rick Walmsley, and Kent Manderville to the Leafs for Gary Leeman, Michel Petit, Craig Berube, Jeff Reese, and Alex Godinnik. So this is a huge trade. And one thing that it hinged on was the fact that Gary Leeman, a former 50-goal scorer, maybe he'd help replace some of that offense that Gilmour's taken to Toronto. It didn't really work out all that well. This was a trade that aged very poorly for Calgary, though it was panned at the time by most. I did have one Flames fan that I talked to regularly back in the day who defended this trade from a Calgary perspective for over a year. Where every time Gilmour would do something special, I'd be like, are you sure that you think that Calgary won this trade? Yep. And he would make all these arguments for why Calgary won that trade, and good on him. I do like when somebody's consistent in their viewpoint. October 17th of 1991, Paul Coffey gets his 1,053rd point. That passes Denny Potvin for first all-time on the scoring list of defensemen, a list that would still be owned by Bobby Orr if not for his knees. March 7th of 1992, Kevin Stevens becomes the first player in NHL history to record 100 points and 200 penalty minutes in the same season. Kevin Stevens was one of the best power forwards in NHL history, might be the best for the fact that he had 100 points and 200 penalty minutes in the same season. It is a shame that Kevin Stevens wasn't a top-notch player for longer in his career. April 27th of 1992, Scotty Bowman coaches his 191st career playoff game. That passes Dick Irvin for first on the all-time list, and Bowman would coach a bunch more playoff games after this. This is the year that the NHL makes it so that the final minute of the period's measured in tenths of a second. It was kind of a big deal, too, because, you just had the seconds on the clock or the seconds not on the clock. There were no tenths of a second. Yeah, imagine that now. Each team had honorary captains that season. For example, the Penguins had Mr. Rogers. Yeah, Fred Rogers was the honorary captain for the Penguins, and ProSet had like a whole set of these cards. Like the Buffalo Sabres had Jim Kelly, Montreal Canadiens had Maurice Richard. Hartford had Susan St. James, who was from what show was that? It was something in Alley. Anyways, it was weird. Susan St. James. Weird choice. Jim Belushi was the pick for the Chicago Blackhawks, which just seemed like a natural at the time, because I swear Jim Belushi talked about Chicago and wore Chicago stuff all the time, so that was pretty natural. And Ralph Macchio, I believe, was the one for the New York Islanders. I debated about putting them all on the board. Now I'm kind of thinking, maybe I should have. But either way, we move along. For Vancouver, it was Rick Hansen, and of course there's schools around here with Rick Hansen's name on them. He was kind of a local celebrity / hero, and kind of still is. So the Sharks start their first season at the Cow Palace, which had a capacity of 11,089. And immediately the conversation was, they're not staying in this building. So they just didn't have their arena built yet. The Art Ross Trophy goes to Mario Lemieux of the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Masterton goes to Mark Fitzpatrick, a goaltender for the New York Islanders. The Calder goes to Pavel Bure of the Vancouver Canucks. And I remember the argument being at the time that Bure had missed the first quarter of the season while he was going through the process of joining the Canucks roster and coming over. It was a bit of a mess, but Bure had enough goals and showed enough in his rookie season to still win the Calder Trophy. The Conn Smythe went to Mario Lemieux for Pittsburgh. The Selke goes to Guy Carbon of Montreal, because who else are you going to give it to? The Hart goes to Mark Messier of the New York Rangers. The Jack Adams goes to Pat Quinn of the Vancouver Canucks, because Vancouver's the surprise team that year. It's a rule that's still there. Your best coach is often going to be the coach that gets more wins out of a team than expected. So whichever team has an unexpected run to the playoffs, usually that'll be your Jack Adams winner. The Norris Trophy goes to Brian Leetch of the New York Rangers. The King Clancy goes to Ray Bourque of the Boston Bruins. The Lady Byng goes to Wayne Gretzky of the LA Kings. The Lester Pearson Award goes to Mark Messier of the New York Rangers. So he wins the Hart Trophy and the Lester Pearson. Both the media and the players very impressed with Messier that season. The Vezina goes to Patrick Roy of the Montreal Canadiens. The Jennings also goes to Patrick Roy of the Montreal Canadiens. He did not share it that year. No one else played the requisite amount of games to get that award. The All-Stars that season, Mark Messier is your first-team All-Star down the middle for the New York Rangers. Mario Lemieux of Pittsburgh's second team. On the left side, Kevin Stevens of Pittsburgh's first team. Luc Robitaille of the LA Kings' second team. On the right side, Brett Hull of St. Louis is still the first-team All-Star. Mark Recchi, who had been traded to Philadelphia during the season, he's your second-team All-Star on the right side. On the blue line, Brian Leetch of the Rangers is first team alongside Ray Bourque of the Boston Bruins. The second team All-Stars, Phil Housley of Winnipeg's your second team All-Star alongside Scott Stevens of New Jersey. So right away, Devils win that transaction. In net, Patrick Roy of Montreal's first team and Kirk McLean of the Vancouver Canucks second team. He had himself quite the season. So Mario Lemieux leads the way in scoring, even though he only played 64 games. He had 44 goals, 87 assists, 131 points. Lemieux was electric. Kevin Stevens finishes second, 80 games, 54 goals, 69 assists, 123 points, and he joins a very small list. Marcel Dion and Mario Lemieux were the only two who'd finished ahead of Gretzky in scoring in his career until this date. As Gretzky, 74 games, 31 goals, 90 assists, 121 points. Brett Hull in St. Louis, 73 games, 70 goals, 39 assists, 109 points. So that's 3 straight seasons where he's had ridiculous amounts of goals. Luc Robitaille, 80 games, 44 goals, 63 assists, 107 points. Mark Messier for the Rangers, 79 games, 35 goals, 72 assists, 107 points. Jeremy Roenick with Chicago, 80 games, 53 goals, 50 assists, 103 points. Steve Yzerman in Detroit, 79 games, 45 goals, 58 assists, 103 points. Brian Leetch with the Rangers, 80 games, 22 goals, 80 assists, 102 points. And Adam Oates in St. Louis rounds out the top 10, not quite 100 points either. 80 games, 20 goals, 79 assists, 99 points. Tim Shovelday in Detroit is your leader in wins alongside McLean. 38, 23, and 9 record for Shovelday, 886 save percentage, 2 shutouts. There would be questions with Shovelday about his ability to raise his game in the playoffs. And so while Shovelday got a lot of wins for Detroit, eventually he gets traded and they're looking for that magic formula in net. Kirk McLean finished with a record of 38, 17, and 9, 901 save percentage, 5 shutouts. It was a great year for McLean. Patrick Roy in Montreal, 36, 22, and 8 record, 914 save percentage, also had 5 shutouts. Don Beaupre in Washington, 29, 17, and 6 record, 884 save percentage, 1 shutout. Andy Mogan, Boston, 28, 22, and 9 record, 887 save percentage, 1 shutout. And so we get to the playoffs. And in the playoffs, a lot of 3-1 series comebacks in that first round. And throughout the 90s, 3-1 series comebacks become really pretty common, to the point where when a team was up 3-1, immediately think, well, they could blow it. So, yeah. If you're wondering where my hair trigger comes from when it comes to playoff time with, well, this could go the other way, it's from the 90s. That absolutely happened a lot. So Edmonton beats LA in 6 games in the first round. Vancouver beats Winnipeg 4-3. That was one of the 3-1 series comebacks. Chicago beats St. Louis 4-2. Detroit beats Minnesota. It takes all 7 games. So Minnesota's tough again, even though they only had 70 points that season. Pittsburgh beats Washington 4-3. The Rangers beat New Jersey 4-3. The Boston Bruins beat Buffalo 4-3. And Montreal beats Hartford 4-3. 6 out of 8 series go to 7 games, and the other 2 go to 6. So, a lot of tension, great playoffs. In the division finals, well, where did the 7-game series go? They're gone now. There are no more. Edmonton beats Vancouver 4-2, which might have been the most devastated I've been as a Canuck fan. Just it felt like that year could have been something special. Chicago beats Detroit in 4 straight games. Pittsburgh beats the Rangers 4-2, and Boston beats Montreal in 4 straight games. So, Boston turning the tides a little bit in that series. between those two. So Chicago and Edmonton in the first round. I remember watching game one because I was sitting next to one of my best friends, and she was a big Oilers fan, and I wasn't. So when Chicago won 8-2, yeah, I might have been kind of obnoxious about it. If she's watching, sorry, but it was still funny. Chicago wins the second game 4-2. Maybe I'm not that sorry. Game three, Edmonton wins or Chicago wins in Edmonton 4-3 in overtime, and then Chicago wins game 4 5-1. The Oilers lose 4 straight games there. Pittsburgh and Boston then. Pittsburgh wins both games at home by scores of 4-2 and 5-2. Pittsburgh then wins in Boston both games by a score of 5-1. So Boston does not last very long against Pittsburgh. That sweep, I remember that one for decades, and then eventually Boston sweeps Pittsburgh, but it's not the same. So in the Stanley Cup final, Pittsburgh enjoys the sweeping, and they keep the sweeping going. They win at home 5-4 and 3-1. They then go to Chicago. They win 1-0 and 6-5. So even though every game is close, Pittsburgh wins every game. They win the series in 4 straight. Chris Chelios had a goal and 4 assists in the final. Dirk Graham had 4 goals. Jeremy Roenick had 2 goals. Michel Goulet had 1 goal. Steve Larmer had an assist in that final. Belfour had an .875 save percentage. Hasek had an .840. Then Rick Tocchet had 2 goals and 6 assists for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So they get Ron Francis one year, and the next year they get Rick Tocchet. They just kept adding. And then Lemieux had 5 goals, 2 assists in that final. Stevens had 2 goals, 3 assists. Ron Francis had a goal and 2 assists. Jaromir Jagr had 2 goals in that Stanley Cup final. Tom Barrasso a .908 save percentage. So back-to-back cups for Barrasso and the Penguins, and it'd be a while before they got it again. What's interesting is, and we'll do the 92-93 season tomorrow, the Pittsburgh Penguins, I think, were the best team in the league in 92-93, but the playoffs sometimes decide how things really turn out and how we remember them. So that 92-93 Penguins team, if they'd won the cup that year, you would have had 3 in a row for the Penguins. That would have been a magical dynasty we'd still be talking about right now. And that 93 team was so good, but they lost in the second round. So we don't remember things that way. All right, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.